Welcome to the Texas News Podcast, where we dive into all things Texas and the future of independence in the great state of Texas. On today's episode, I'm interviewing Lieutenant Colonel Allen West, former congressman for Florida, former chairman of the state Republican Party, and current chair of the Dallas County GOP. We're going to be talking school choice and the educational savings account and voucher issue. Plus, we're going to do a deep dive on his perspective related to the current dysfunction in the Texas legislature. So don't go anywhere. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining me again for the Texas News Podcast. Thank you all so very much tuning in week after week. We've had a tremendous response to the last couple of podcast episodes that we've done. You need to go back and check those out. If you haven't, Javier Hernandez talking about Puerto Rican independence. We had State Representative Andy Hopper on for the last episode. And on this episode, we're going to have Lieutenant Colonel Allen West on, and you can almost view it as maybe another perspective on the interview that we did with Andy Hopper. We've got going to cover a lot of territory, but in particular, I wanted to pick Allen's brain about an open letter that he had written related to the current debate in Texas over school choice, if you want to call it that, the ESAs or education savings accounts, school vouchers. I mean, who knows at this point what exactly it is, because there's so many terms being thrown about. But the text of the legislation itself is pretty straightforward and has raised a lot of concerns with Texas families that are either homeschooling their kids in public school or in private school. And it seems like it is a bill that only legislators like. So today we're going to get Allen West's take on the issue, particularly since he sits as the current chairman of the Dallas County GOP. Additionally, we're going to talk to Allen about the dysfunction in the Texas legislature. Again, a follow-up to or different perspective on what we spoke with Representative Andy Hopper about on the previous episode. There is a massive amount of dysfunction in the Texas legislature. And I wanted to get Allen West's take on it because if you don't remember, Allen previously ran for governor back, he was the chairman of the state Republican Party and then resigned that to run for governor and primary Governor Greg Abbott. And one of the things he used to talk about on the campaign trail that I heard a lot about from him was dysfunction in the Texas legislature. And so given what we're seeing and the frustrations that Texans are having with what's going on in the legislature, we're going to have that conversation as well. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and welcome my guest, Lieutenant Colonel or Chairman Allen West. Colonel, thank you so much for joining us. You and I have known each other for quite a long time. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know whether to refer to you as Colonel, Chairman, Congressman.
How about by my name, Allen? Okay, that works.
Yeah, I mean, it gets complicated, but look, I'm so glad you were able to join me today. I want to talk about the entire school voucher debate that's going on right now. As chairman of the Dallas County GOP, you took a pretty public and bold stand on the whole ESA and school voucher thing. Why don't you kind of tell everyone exactly where you are on that, as if your open letter left any doubt? But
I thought I was pretty explicit with it, but
I thought so too. But for those that may not have read it, why don't you kind of fill them in and explain to them what the opposition is?
Well, the title of the piece is called "What is School Choice?" because everyone is running around talking about we want to pass school choice and we want to pass school choice. And the thing that I try to bring out to people is that I'm sick and tired of government actually acting like they're giving us something that we already have. Back in the 1960s, my parents exercised their school choice. They did not send me to the two elementary schools that were located in our inner city community in Atlanta, and that was C.W. Hill and John Hope. They sent me to Our Lady of Lourdes Catholic School, which is a private Catholic school right across the street from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s final resting spot in Ebenezer Baptist Church. They continue to do so even after elementary school days, and I spent 2 years at another private Catholic school called Marist. I did end up finishing in a public high school, Henry Grady High School there in Atlanta, and the council culture people have changed the name of it. But the thing was, I had a good, solid foundation of an education. It's just the same. Our daughters, Aubrey and Austin, when I retired from the military, my wife Angela and I, we exercised our school choice in sending them to private Catholic schools. So we already have that. I think what we're really trying to talk about is educational freedom and parental rights in making that decision. And how does, the government, if it has a role, it has to be able to set the conditions for parents to be able to make that good and proper decision for an individual to not have to be forced into a failing school system. And the other thing is that when we look at the fact that we have, the Federal Department of Education, which is not an age-old department. I mean, it just came about during the Carter administration, basically because the teachers' unions wanted that. Here in Texas, we have the Texas Education Association. Then on top of that, we have the Texas Board of Education, supervisors for the Board of Education. So we've got all of these entities, but still, when you look at what is happening, Dan, here in Texas, our kids are not reading at grade level. They're not doing math at grade level overall in the state of Texas. Sure, there's some bright spots. So I think the argument is not about this school choice thing, but how do we enable people to be able to have educational freedom? And that's what I was trying to bring out in this the piece that I wrote. Of course, everyone is now coming out, you're against school choice. No, I believe in parents being able to choose, but I believe the government needs to extricate themselves away and out of that decision. And when I read and look at the language, government still has its tentacles in there by saying that, oh, okay, since we're going to give you this thing called school choice and we're going to give you the ability to have your taxpayer dollars. And first and foremost, those dollars belong to the taxpayer. They're not the government's money. So again, you have this perception that we're giving you something back. We're also going to say where that money can be used. And I'll read the language as I quoted in the piece that I wrote. The language that is very questionable says very simply, money received under the program may be used only for the following education-related expenses incurred by a participating child at a pre-approved education service provider or vendor of educational products. And guess who's in charge of making that decision? The Texas Comptroller. So now we've got a federal Department of Education. We've got a Texas Education Association. Now we've got the Comptroller of the state of Texas involved in the education of our children. And what the hell did they have to do with that? And who is suffering? It's still the child. So what I'm trying to say is this whole property tax thing, which is heinous, you and I have discussed this many times before, it violates natural rights theory. Instead of people being given some voucher, just say that you can claim whatever you spend on the education of your child, and that will be reduced and taken out of your property tax assessment. I think that's a very simple way to do that. And we can also encourage, some of these corporations that are moving here because they like our tax policies to get involved in providing, scholarships to deserving young kids in, education deserts. We have food deserts. We also have education deserts. And so I don't understand why anyone would want to disagree with that, especially when you understand it as Republicans. We have a Republican governor, Republican lieutenant governor. It says it's very simple in Parents' Rights, Plank 84 of the 2024 Republican of Texas platform. We support further empowering all Texas families to choose from public, private, charter, or homeschool options for their children's education and funding, which shall follow the student with no strings attached. We oppose regulations on homeschooling or the curriculum of private or religious schools and believe a constitutional amendment should be adopted accordingly. In lieu of funding, citizens may use property tax exemptions. I just read you from the Republican Party of Texas platform that the grassroots Republican members voted on. So why are we having legislators that seemingly don't get the memo?
Yeah, it's I'll tell you, it's interesting to me that and honestly, why your open letter I think struck such a chord with me in particular and with a lot of people is we live in a society right now where complex ideas, have been reduced down to slogans or terms
Mm.
so that people can be bashed over the head with them. Just like you said, you've been accused of being opposed to school choice. In your opinion, did they essentially co-opt the idea of school choice with this particular bill just by turning it into a slogan?
Well, yeah, that's the whole point, and that's why again the piece that I wrote is entitled "What is School Choice?" And so no one is coming out there and trying to define this. No one is trying to come out there and put some meat on the bones. It's just another popular slogan like Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. How well did that work out? And
Right.
so I'm very leery, Republican or Democrat, both sides do this, of these very deceitful things. No child left behind. Well, we still are leaving children behind when it comes to education. But who's, being enriched? These vendors and all of these other people that are going in there and data mining our kids and what have you, and selling their goods and wares. And, our kids are forced to be a part of it. So I think it's about time that we get back and like you said, get to the basics of things and the fundamentals, the blocking and tackling, and understand that we're supposed to be promoting the education of children, not anything else. And the more agencies that we have involved and engaged in the area of education, it has not proven to be a good result from that.
Yeah, I mean, let's put it in terms the education crowd will understand. If this was an algebra problem, and we know on one side we've got students, the future generation of Texans
Uh-huh.
on one end, and on the other end we want good education outcomes, prosperity, opportunity, those sorts of things for those students, and we tell them solve for X. It seems like doesn't really solve for X. It is just a wildly different answer than what they need to produce the outcomes that they say that they want.
Yeah, it's another feel good measure. I mean, people can go around and thump themselves on the chest, say hey, look, we passed school choice in Texas. But again, they are depending upon the fact that there are enough, as Vladimir Lenin would say, useful idiots and mindless lemmings that won't go out there and peel the onion back and look at the core and see really what this is all about. So we need to have government and its tentacles, taken away from this thing called education, and so that we can get back to parents being able to make the right decisions and make the right choices and use their resources, not this, mother may I, can you please give me back my dollars so that I can do this? And I know that you're still going to decide what the end results are going to be, and you're going to funnel me in a certain direction. No, that should not be the case.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, and this is going to be just your assessment, but all of a sudden now, we went from having a sort of a lengthy multi-year debate on why education outcomes have been so poor in the Texas public school system. We have anecdotal evidence where there are some bright and shining spots, but overall the numbers are not great. And so we went from having a multi-year debate working toward a solution for that to all of a sudden now it's pedal to the metal. You guys have to accept or, pound sand. I mean, Abbott spent tons and tons of money in the last primaries to essentially get legislators on his side for this particular view. Why do you think that all of a sudden there is this urgency to get this done?
Well, that's what always comes about when government takes something and they try to turn it into us being able to determine the outcomes and us being able to determine what the results are. We have to get this thing passed through because we want to be able to say this on my resume that we got this passed through, even though it's not something that is really, as you say, going to address the root causes of the problem. It's so many things that are involved here. I mean, we need to have better teachers. I mean, how many times do we open up and we hear about another teacher that's sexually assaulting a child or things of this nature, we got to get the right type of teachers. The military used to have a program called Troops to Teachers, where you could, senior non-commissioned officers and officers that retired from the military. Many of these people, they have expertise in math, the science, and the things of that nature. You can hire them to come into these schools and be teachers. That was a great program. When I taught high school in Deerfield Beach in Florida, that was the program that I came in under. So let's look at the teaching issue. It's not just about continuing to throw more money at it, or it's not just like you say about the blind slogans. Why is it that our kids are not reading and doing math at grade level? And it's not about, standardized testing, because what ends up happening is that you get people that come in and they just try to teach a kid how to pass a test. That's not creating a living, breathing, thinking individual. That's not developing critical thinking skills when you just teach them how to deduce the right answer out of a multiple choice question. So it's all of these intricacies that are involved, but that's not the political way. The political way is to come up with the soundbite, get people to believe in the soundbite, get the soundbite passed, and say, "Oh, look, hey, we did it. It's great, and things are going to continue on." I asked someone on a recent panel, "What is the task and purpose of the TEA, the Texas Education Association? I mean, what do they do? What's their value added?" It's a lot of money that goes to that organization, and are they necessary? We got a lot of superintendents that get paid a lot of high figure incomes. Are they adding any benefit to the education of our children? So those are the things that we should be looking at. And I truthfully believe that if we want to do better, and something I recommend, go back and look what Booker T. Washington did when he established Tuskegee Normal Industrial Institute, where his three-point plan was education, entrepreneurship, and self-reliance. He got people to understand it's not just about a book learning, but it is also about skills learning as well, so that you can be a productive member of society. So I think that we need to, have, I'm going to be very honest, a revolutionary concept when it comes to education in the United States of America. 'Cause right now in America and in Texas, we're failing kids.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, from if you look at it from the perspective, Mirabel Lamar, second president of the republic,
Georgia boy.
yeah, and he was, he was a big proponent, because that was something that the Mexican central government did, was they did not want the populace to be educated. And you find tyrannical governments around the world, that's one of the first places they attack. They either co-opt it or forbid it altogether. And so, I think what Lamar had was the nugget of an idea, conceptual. And even though it's entrenched, it's written in the Texas Constitution that Texas should provide a system of public education. We obviously believe that kids should be educated. I mean, that's the only way that we're going to preserve freedom and liberty for future generations. But I mean, what we've got here, in my estimation, and you can feel free to agree or disagree, but what we have here is we have the equivalent of a patient going into the hospital with multiple organ failure. We have an education system that has been broken because of political reasons, economic reasons, and cultural reasons. I mean, there are so many different components that are failing or are broken with it, that you wind up getting these, what would be the equivalent of a radical treatment here in Texas. I mean, look, if we'll talk about the legislature later, but if you want to look at a good example of how the Texas government often operates like a AAA ball club for the federal government, look at how often they pass one-size-fits-none policies that are broken. I mean, do we even need to talk about Robin Hood? I mean,
Yes.
there are so many things, and so I'm just curious, from your perspective, why do you think that Governor Greg Abbott has picked this particular hill to die on?
Well, you bring up the point. We say in the military, you put a Band-Aid on a sucking chest wound. And we definitely have a sucking chest wound when it comes to the system of education. But obviously, I mean, there have been some concerns about, his relationship to a lot of these education lobbyists and contracts and vendors and things of this nature, because that's why you still have the government that's involved in making the decisions, as I just read from the piece of legislation, that they will be the ones that approve where, someone can spend these dollars. And so I say you just follow the money and see who are the ones that are involved. Just the same as, with No Child Left Behind and all these other things, you follow the money and see who really are the ones benefiting by this quote unquote political decision, which is not a practical decision. And so, look, I understand public education. There's nothing wrong with having public education. There's some great public schools here in the state of Texas. But I think what we're trying to do is say that parents need to have educational freedom. They should not be locked into failed school systems, and they need to be enabled, as it said, empowered to be able to have the funds, their resources to be able to go out and do that and not be penalized for it. When you say the money should follow the child, well, yeah, it's their money. But don't again come in and insert yourself into that decision saying that, yes, but you have to go here and, choose from this, pre-approved list, choose from these vendors that we have pre-approved, because the next thing you know, then they're going to start dictating what type of curriculum and things of that nature is there. We need to have, more of these STEM programs. And remember the key thing that I learned, and I've got a 3-year-old grandson, and this is what we're working on. Up until a certain point of time, you learn to read. Most people say that's 3rd or 4th grade. Then after 3rd, 4th grade, you have to read to learn. Well, if you're not building that foundation so that they're learning to read, then they're not going to be able to read to learn. And that's why I see so many of our kids falling behind. And look at all the high tech industries that are coming here to the state of Texas. But how many of these high tech industries are looking at Texas and, its education system and the students it's producing to be able to go in and be a part of that incredibly, growing institution? I mean, the Chicago branch and New York Stock Exchange is going to be moving here to Dallas. Shouldn't we be, doing better and training our kids in math and, financial studies, things of this nature, so that they can get in a pipeline and get a job in some of these places?
Yeah, it's interesting. We're currently the 8th largest economy in the world. And and you mentioned the branch that's moving from Chicago to Texas. We've got the Texas Stock Exchange. We are the new Silicon Valley with technological innovations. And I think that we're the 8th largest economy in the world just by, I think, brute force, right? I mean, it's through companies that are moving here, but are we really setting ourselves up for the next generation of success to carry that from us being the 8th largest economy in the world to the 6th or the 5th or even the 4th, which, there have been prominent investors come out and say that they see by 2030 Texas will probably be the 5th largest economy in the world. But I'm really concerned, and I think a lot of people are too. I've talked to numerous families, public school, homeschool, the private school that are doing that for their kids. And there seems to be this broad base of concern for how SB3 implements these changes. And I think, what you're saying is correct, which is these folks are really concerned about how this engineering is going to take place, how many strings are going to be attached, even though it says that they're not. So I want to talk to you about that from the standpoint. You just read straight from the Republican Party platform a moment ago. You sit in a really interesting position as chairman of the Republican Party for one of the most populous counties in Texas. What are Republicans in Dallas? What is their sort of rank and file? What is their perspective?
Well, I think you're at a ground zero here, and there's a strong contingent of very astute individuals that are paying attention to this legislation. They've, like I said, peeled the onion back, and they are troubled because, once again, the saying in the Middle East is never allow the camel to get his nose under the tent because the rest of the body will follow. Excuse me. So if they start to see this intrusion, they start to see the tying of here's your voucher, but they are really concerned about this. And who are going to be these vendors? Are these vendors going to be connected to entities from outside of Texas or even entities from outside of the United States of America? So I think it's so important, once again, that we allow people to make these best possible decisions themselves. Look, there are people down in Highland Park. Highland Park is a separate independent school district. I'm sure they're quite happy with the type of education they have there. Although we want to make sure that, again, kids are getting that good history education, civics education, science and math science, math, and reading education all the way through so they can be good quality members. But when you look at the other side of the Trinity River, and you look at the Dallas ISD, who is more so concerned still with DEI, CRT, and little boys playing in little girls' sports rather than looking at, oh, we're failing kids. They're not reading and doing math at the grade level. That's where a lot of people are starting to look and having concerns about this. And I think that that's starting to reach into the minority communities as well, because everyone wants to see their child be successful. I mean, my parents wanted to see me be successful. Even though I was born in a segregated hospital, they knew that there was a thing out there called the American dream. And you can only achieve equality of opportunity by way of a good quality education. And that's what enables me to be sitting here talking with Daniel Miller today. So that's what we're starting to see happen and change, in that parents, Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, whomever, whatever demographic, whatever socioeconomic level, they're starting to pay attention because they don't want to be told what they can or can't do when it comes to preparing their child, which is their legacy.
Well, one last question on this particular topic before we shift gears. If this were Allen West Planet, and this was Allen West, Texas, what would you like to see happen starting today?
I would like to see them take this piece of legislation and look at every correlating plank from the Republican Party of Texas platform and say, does it align? If it doesn't align, we got to get it into alignment. That's the bottom line. This is a Republican state. Like I said, we have a Republican governor, lieutenant governor, Republican Senate, Republican House. Donald Trump won this state by 15 percentage points. Ted Cruz won this state by almost 10. 12 or 14 border counties went to Donald Trump. This is a Republican state. So let's act like it, and let's find that guiding principle, which is the Republican Party of Texas platform, and align this legislation with those planks.
Well, fantastic. Well, let's shift gears a bit. Let's zoom out from this whole ESA discussion, and I want to talk about your viewpoint on some of the dysfunction in the Texas legislature. Now, I'm gonna go back in Mr. Peabody's Wayback Machine. It wasn't that long ago you were running for governor. You primaried Governor Abbott. You're a Texas First Pledge signer, had tons of supporters in the TNM. And one of the things that I heard you talk about a lot was, how dysfunctional things were in the Texas government. And it seems that things have really only gotten worse. We can talk about the speaker race and the fight over the speakership. Dade Phelan, we saw this play out dramatically, actually in the last primaries, where we saw an obliteration of incumbents, and that could happen again. So from your viewpoint, tell me, and I think everyone would like to hear your voice instead of mine on this one. What is going on in the Texas legislature? Why is it so broken?
Well, it's again, I say follow the money, follow the lobby interests and things of this nature, because for whatever reason, people aren't paying attention to the interests of the folks that elected these individuals to be in the elected position that they are in. When I was the state party chairman for the Republican Party here in Texas, and I remember when Dade Phelan went over and said, look, you can do what you want. I've got this handful of Republicans. I got the Democrats, and I'm going to be the speaker. And I publicly called him a political traitor. And of course, everyone went apoplectic or whatever. But what do you call that? If I'm a commander in the military and we have a fight against an Al Qaeda element, a Taliban element, or whatever, and we go in and we take this town, we lose some troops in doing so. But after we get the victory, I'll go over to the Taliban or Al Qaeda commander and say, hey, let's cut a deal. and I'll let you, continue to have 35, 40% of this town, and we'll take the other part. What do you think my troops would think of me? Well, that's exactly what is happening here, and that brings us to where we are. You have a majority in the Texas State House, Republican majority of 88-62. Why do you need to have Democrat support? Why would you go out and all of a sudden create this vice chair position, which is really a co-chair position, and empower them with resources like they've never had before, and put them in positions, but come back and say, well, they're not committee chairs, but they're almost as powerful as committee chairs, what you have done. And you push through this rules package without any debate whatsoever. You brought about a nuclear option. If you're a Republican in the state of California, you don't have a chance, and what, to have a voice. But why is it that here in Texas there's this reticence, there's this recalcitrance after Donald Trump wins this state by 15 percentage points, that you still believe you've got the power share with your political opposition, which is truthfully an ideological opposition? I don't get it. I cannot explain it. You would have to get someone to come in like a Dustin Burrows or whoever and say, why couldn't you just go by your own rules in the House Republican caucus and select a speaker out of the 88 of y'all based upon the numbers that you're supposed to reach? Why would you want to be the Speaker of the Texas State House when you had to have Democrats do it for you? 49 Democrats, 36 Republicans. You had more Republicans saying that they did not want the current Speaker of the House to be the Speaker. And that's confounding to people. That's dysfunctional.
Yeah, it's definitely broken. And I would posit, and I'm going to have Claver Kamau and Monty on the podcast soon as well, and we're essentially taking a trip down memory lane. We're going to go back all the way to the coup against Craddock, and how Strauss got to be the speaker. And it seems like while that was the path for Strauss to become speaker, it seems that these establishment Republicans have effectively realized that that is a way that they can keep a lock on the Texas House, between the coalition with the Democrats and then the continuing filter that is the calendars committee. There is essentially a lock on it. And although they call it the People's House, the people really don't have a voice there. You mentioned a moment ago some of these extraordinary measures that were taken during the speaker fight with Burrows, and again, the implementation of Democrat vice chairs. So they have a lock. They're essentially co-chairs, as you said, given how much power that they have. Even though it's a vice chairmanship, it is a chairmanship nonetheless, and therefore, by the word of the legislative priorities, it is a violation. Are you seeing or hearing more discussion about Rule 44 censure in there in Dallas County or any of the other counties
Well, we already did that. We already did it here in Dallas County. We had a censure of State House Representatives Morgan Meyer and Angie Chin Button. We prepared those resolutions. We sent it to them. We invited them to come and offer up their case before the body. They refused to do so, which to me is the arrogance of officialdom, as Marcus Tullius Cicero would call it. And so therefore we had the people of their State House district vote, 108 and 112, I believe. And I'm in Angie Chin Button's State House district. And then we had the entire body vote. And on all three occasions, they voted for them to be censured. We met the threshold for Rule 44, and that package has been sent down to the State Republican Executive Committee. And look, it's on them. We'll see what they do about it. But I think it's time that we have less talk and more action, because people have to be held responsible and accountable for. I mean, look, they violated their own rules. People go out and work hard to get these individuals elected, and then they go down there and basically give people, that finger salute. At some point in time, you have to say enough. And because if you don't, it becomes very Pavlovian. Because if you continue to reward bad behavior, you're only going to get more of that bad behavior. Or you look at, why don't we have closed primaries here in the state of Texas,
Yeah.
because you saw exactly what that led to in a runoff race. A runoff race between, Dave Phelan and, David,
The Covey.
Covey.
That's
And
my district. I'm in Phelan's district.
see, and in a runoff race, you go over and you get, over 1,000 Democrats to vote for you, and you end up winning by some 400 votes. So basically, again, you had Democrats decide who your state house representative is in a district that's Republican.
Now, for a lot of the people out there that may be fresh to this topic, we talked a lot about Rule 44, and for those who don't know, just sort of to encapsulate, Rule 44 is the rule in the Republican Party rules that essentially allows the county party to censure, not censor. I've seen people misspell it on social media. Stop it; it's embarrassing. But to censure these electeds that violate the principles or the legislative priorities. And so that's, for those out there who don't know, that's exactly what we're talking about here. And I want to talk about that a little bit, Alan. You know, we saw in the last Republican convention, congratulations to us, we got, our planks back in there and strengthened them and all that, about a vote on independence and, state sovereignty. We did really well, but the most action that I think, most consequential action for the future of Texas politics, is going to be how they added more teeth to Rule 44, with the intention, and I believe, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but after a certain threshold of Rule 44 censures,
Three.
the rules now state that a county chairman can refuse to accept their application for a place on the ballot. That's correct, right?
Yeah, well, it has to actually be, solidified at the state Republican Executive Committee. That's what they have to do to say that that person will be refused to be allowed onto the ballot. So that's why the packet has to go down to the SREC that we just passed, and again, we'll see what they do with it, because if you don't stand up for something, my mom used to say a man must stand for something, or else he'll fall for anything. Then you're sending a message that said, okay, uh, the folks in that county, in the executive committee, in that districts, those two respective districts, said that this is what they want. They do believe that there have been these censurable acts, and if they're going to come along and say, well, let's give them another chance. Let's give them, no. I mean, at some point in time, you have to say enough is enough. And so we'll see
Right.
what happens going forward. But yeah, there has to be some teeth. There has to be some ramifications and consequences. Or else, like I said, it becomes a Pavlovian experiment.
Well, I will say this. I'm very anxious to see how this plays out at the state level, particularly in relation to knocking some of these people off the ballot. We're getting right now during the legislative session what has been pretty common in past legislative sessions, which is they do a lot of things right up front to get hated on. The speaker's race is typically that that first opportunity for them to just make the electorate mad. And then they do the typical cheating husband situation, where they show up and they give some $2 box of chocolates
Yeah.
that they got at the C store, and some Tyler Roses they picked up from the dude on the street corner. They come out at the tail end and go, most conservative session ever. And I recall just how outraged I was at the gaslighting when they came out, said most conservative session ever. We passed a ban on a state income tax, and it's like, wait a minute, we already had a ban on a state income
Yeah.
tax. We didn't need two, right? But it looks good on mailers, and so they do all this stuff to try to make up with the electorate. I have a serious concern, and I don't know if you share it, about how long the memory is for Republican primary voters, and how strong the will is of the state Republican Executive Committee to do exactly what you say, which is, look, these guys are busting rules left and right. they're taking we've talked about the ESA not matching the legislative priority, having those strings attached, them getting into the gray area. We've talked about the Rule 44 censures. I'm sure there will probably be other things this session. Robert Nichols took a vote on taxpayer-funded lobbying yesterday. He omitted Mays Middleton's bill and essentially, I think, probably violated that particular priority. So, there's going to be those opportunities, but I think there is some concern. So if we don't see this action from the SREC to try to bump these guys off the ballot, what is the recourse for Texans that want to be represented in the way that that the platform says, or just in the way that they feel? If they're not being represented, where is their recourse?
Well, I think the most important thing is to, as I say, educate, inform, and activate. At the county level, you've got to make sure that people are aware of what is happening down in Austin. You've got to have your legislative priorities subcommittee, or whatever you want to call it, that is tracking all of these votes and letting people know. Because you don't want them to go into the dark hole, into the void, where all of a sudden at the end, people say, hey, look at us, how great we are. No, I don't think so, because I've been tracking you the entire time. So that's the important thing, is that we've got to develop that report card, that scorecard, whatever you want to call it, that tracking mechanism in our respective counties that will enable people to be informed and educated and be able to hold people accountable. So we have to have that. But then again, the other thing is that, just like what we saw coming out of this last primary, and we'll be past the primary a year from now, start looking at the candidates that can go out there and primary these individuals and challenge these individuals. But don't put up 3, 4, 5 because you just dilute your vote. Just do it one-on-one.
Well, look, I'll tell you this. We know that some of these incumbents in the House are nervous about it, because we know that they've been polling their districts to see if they could win as independents. So they have enough fear that the Republican Party is going to follow through with what they have said to determine whether or not they're going to be able to run as an independent and still win their seat. So there is a bit of fear there. And honestly, that's where I kind of like my elected representatives. I like them to be in fear of losing their seat if they don't behave. And I think a lot of people, if they adopted that attitude about their representatives, would probably be a lot better off. They'd probably get a lot better representation, or at least more responsive.
My dad used to say before he would belt me down, fear is a motivator.
Yeah, well, and we know the one thing that these guys fear is not getting reelected, and you know that by how much money was poured into the Phelan-Covey race in the primary.
Incredible.
I mean, that's like there are some states that have statewide elections for governor that kind of money doesn't pour into.
Yeah,
and if anyone out there wonders, there's got to be some motivating factor other than that $7,200 a year paycheck. So anyway, well, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. I got to tell you, Alan, thank you so much for coming on here. Great discussion, and I'm looking forward to doing this again soon.
I look forward to it, and you take care, Dan.
Well, thank you again to Chairman West, he said I could call him Alan now. I mean, I have that problem, when people have different titles at different times, what do you call them? But anyway, look, Alan, I really do appreciate it, and thank you all again for tuning in. And hopefully you got some more perspective, some more insight into these issues. I will tell you this, and Alan and I, we just spoke about this. There are a lot of people out there, a lot of Texans that don't know that this is happening. They don't know what the drill down on these issues are. And the reason being something that we've said all along in relation to the Texas issue, which is, that you if you walk down the street, grabbed 100 random people and asked them who the Speaker of the House is, odds are, if they can answer the question, would tell you Mike Johnson and not Dustin Burrows. And that's because the federal issues have a tendency to suck all the oxygen out of the room. All of that attention gets diverted to all things federal. And so when it comes time to vote for these guys in the next election, which I think it was pretty evident from what Alan said. Look, we got to stay active now, but you got to keep your sights set on those next primaries, right? That's where you're going to fix this problem, or you're going to have your next opportunity to fix this problem. But the fact of the matter is that your neighbors need to know, the people you go to church with, other families in your, that your kids go to school with, people at work. They need to understand these issues, and these issues directly affect every single one of us. Right. I mean, I literally heard somebody the other day say they really didn't care about the school choice issue because they didn't have any kids. Well, wait a minute. You do realize that part of the reason that your property taxes are higher than a giraffe's butthole is because of the public school system, where, you had, I'm here in Jefferson County, and in Jefferson County, at one point in Beaumont ISD, they had a superintendent being paid $500,000 a year. That's a problem. So, how this works, and some of the criticism that's coming in about these ESAs, about how they're going to fund it. Well, guess where that's going to come from? If you're a taxpayer, then you are going to be, or you need to be, concerned about this. It directly affects you. If you think that what's going on in the Texas legislature doesn't affect you, I want you to look around and understand that dysfunction in the Texas legislature leads to things not getting done, or things getting done incorrectly, a lot of times in the name of putting something stupid on a mailer by an incumbent come election time, to try to make the case that they actually give a crap about you. Right? I mean, this is the kind of stuff that we have to deal with. So yes, it directly affects you. And if you're a Texas supporter, dysfunction in the Texas legislature directly affects you. Because if you support a vote on Texas independence, understand that the only way that you are going to get that referendum is to get super active in unclogging that sewer pipe that leads straight to Austin, Texas, and stands between you and your vote on our future. I get asked all the time. Hey, how can we ensure that our government in Austin is going to be any better than what we got in Washington, D.C.? Well, this is your opportunity, right? The opportunity to care about what happens in Austin doesn't just come after Texas becomes independent. Your opportunity to care about what's happening in Austin is right now, right? Right now. Short-term thinking says, we only have to look at tomorrow. Long-term thinking says, how is this going to affect future generations? And that long-term thinking and how it's going to affect future generations means caring about the dysfunction in the Texas legislature and the Texas government as a whole right now. You want to be free of bad government in Washington, D.C., that you have no control over, right? You can't change Washington, D.C., but you know what you can change? You can change your government right here in Texas. You have that opportunity. You don't have an opportunity to take Nancy Pelosi out of office, or the John Fettermans, or the AOCs of the world. You don't have an opportunity to get rid of unaccountable, unelected federal judges, right? That's why Texas makes so much sense for us. That's why Texas should be self-governing and independent. But what you do have is you have an opportunity right now, right this very moment, to change how you are being governed in Texas. And so the question is, are you going to seize that opportunity? Are you going to do what it takes? You heard what the colonel said. I mean, he's breaking it down. He's telling you the things that are concerning and some things that are broken. And we'll be talking more about this on future podcasts. I mentioned the trip down memory lane, so that's coming up with Claver Kamau. So you guys will understand how the Texas legislature got as dysfunctional as it is, all the way back to the initial fight that got Joe Strauss elected as the Texas Speaker of the House. So we're going to continue to talk about these things in future episodes with future guests, and you're going to want to pay attention to those, But look, if you're ready to do something about how you're being governed right now, right? If anything that you heard today says, you know what, I understand now. I get it. I know that I need to be a part of the solution. Well, then your first step right out of the gate is to join a movement like ours. Join our movement so that we can take Texas back. Every single day, we're getting new signers on the Texas First Pledge. Run for office, right? You can do those things, but we're working to make Texas self-governing, free, and independent, and that means being sure that we have good government and good representation right here in our own backyard. And so I'm going to encourage you, if you haven't done it already, head over to tnm.me/join and become a member of the Texas Nationalist Movement today. If you don't want to be a member, you just want to help in our efforts, you can go donate. Just click the donate link and head over and donate. Make a contribution. Help us keep this message out there. Help us move forward toward Texas independence. And then, of course, look, if you can't do that or you've already done that, then here's what you can do. Wherever you find this podcast, you like it, you share it, you subscribe to it, you do those things because that helps us get the message out to more and more people that need to hear things like what Alan West said today. And so with that, my friends, that is a wrap for this episode of the Texas News Podcast. And so I will leave you with the words I leave you with every time we're together. They're the words of Sam Houston when he said that Texas will again lift its head and stand among the nations. I believe that time is now, and the question is, will you stand with her?